I would welcome all of you for taking the time out for today's webinar. Today's webinar is about reimaging ITDR post COVID-19, the new normal. The panelists that we have today are a esteemed batch of two people. Mr. Chitranjan Kajwadkar, he has popularly known as CK, has over 42 years of experience in IT, covering software, infrastructure, data center management, network information, cybersecurity, BCP, DR, etc. For the past 20 years or so, he was responsible for managing mission critical systems at stock exchanges and clearing corporations. We are privileged today also to have Mr. Ted Katagi. Ted is the founder CEO of Kenja KK. His goal is to provide a new and improved way of working in enterprise cloud software. Ted has been head of Fidelity's Japan Private Equity Group, top 50 global executive for Vodafone Group, and CMO for Vodafone Japan, and currently an MBA professor at Nagoya University of Commerce and Business. So we're going to start with CK. CK, it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you. Are you able to hear me, Tarun and Chanchal, so that I'll take that as a test of my microphone?
We can hear you, yes.
Great. So good afternoon, everybody, depending upon geography. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. My name is C. Kajwadkar, as I was introduced. You can call me CK. We all have been living with COVID. We just celebrated, I don't know whether we should call it celebration, 1 year of COVID. IT industry and ITDR professionals have gone through different experiences, varied experiences. We are still learning. We don't know how much we have to learn. At this juncture, we thought that we should kind of talk about our experiences and how we should proceed from now till next few years, because COVID has taught us many, many things. The purpose of this seminar is basically to share the knowledge and also learn from participants, because all of us from different geographies at different levels and different roles, we have learned a lot, and hopefully this seminar will make us more knowledgeable as to how to handle ITDR when it comes to unusual situations. About the seminar, I want to mention that just to make it more interactive and to stay tuned with each other, few opinion polls have been introduced. Those opinion polls will help us understand various viewpoints, how people are looking at the scenario and situation, and how as an industry as a whole should try and take forward the challenges in front of us. This is a curated content. What I mean by that, I have learned myself in the industry. I have also acquired information from Google. However, I want to specifically mention, I have had informal conversations with very seasoned industry veterans in order to learn from them, in order to understand how they have gone through this journey. And I've also spoken to service providers who are in this business, providing various services that helped us kind of overcome the situation. I wish to place on record their thanks. They have, some of them are registered here. I wish to thank them. The third point about this webinar is a pragmatic conversation with all of you. The reason is that in various white papers, various vendor presentations, we get to know many things. However, we as practitioners, when we have a conversation with each other, the intent is to share and learn from each other. So this is about webinar, because in this pandemic, we have had pandemic of webinars. All of you have gone through that. So I want to kind of begin with a small poll, and I'll request Tarun to raise the poll here, opinion poll about the situation currently. Tarun? So the question is, in your opinion, which part of IT experienced maximum impact? You have multiple choices. We had employees working from home. We experienced problem with that. Central DC facilities, whether it is captive or hosted with third party, or the network connectivity. Among these which is the one that you felt is maximum impact? Brilliant. The numbers are still changing, rising. Great. Wow. So work from home seems to have been leading many issues around that, and it's rightly identified. And that's the area maximum time was spent because COVID came almost as a surprise to everyone. Very few organizations were actually prepared to handle a pandemic scenario like this. I'm happy to see central DC facilities. Of course, there were difficulties, challenges, network connectivity also, but employee working from home was biggest challenge. Thank you very much. Can we end the poll here?
So these are the results for everyone to see.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Go on, sir.
Yeah, I'll proceed further. Now moving further, post this poll, what we're going to see is what happened and where is the impact point. Obviously, the impact on IT operations, many areas. Just to illustrate a few, I have identified few areas. As we are rightly identified, acceptance of work from home as a culture and the impact was so high that many of us were actually underprepared. Some were compelled because organizational reasons, regulatory reasons, work from home was not acceptable norm there. Some of us were compelled to accept this norm. Some of us were prepared, but not so much. The wider acceptance of work from home as a culture, and many of us had to develop ad hoc policies. Obviously, work from home had weaker controls, capacity, license, scaling issues with reference to VPN connectivity and many other things. Obviously, even today, many of us are struggling with heightened endpoint security issues due to dual use of laptops, because it is likely that employees will use the same laptop for a variety of things, because the family structure itself has undergone a disturbance. The kids at home, family at home, and everybody wanting to go through the motions of work from home. However, the impact is so high that the acceptance of work from home has become very high. We are now reading news that many organizations have embraced that as a strategy for good. The next level, what we saw is adoption of virtual meeting platform for serious business. All of us have been now tuned to various links and various platforms. Even conservative organizations have started holding very decorative meetings like board meetings, audit committee meetings, etc., also using virtual platforms. They were very much concerned and worried pre-COVID era, but looks like they have loosened out. Many unthinkable avenues, judiciary, medical consultation, all of them have started experiencing and accepting virtual platforms. The consultation, school education has also increased. School education actually is very high. Kids have started learning many things using the e-learning platforms. So that was another impact. The organizations, enterprises with captive on-premises DCDR, they experience some kind of support issues. Their own staff was unable to reach or unable to reach back. Non-IT staff, vendors, support personnel. So initial period, there were difficulties. And last is the positive sign of that. All of us started working on digital transformations in an accelerated pace. The traction for cloud was high, but in recent past, the traction for cloud is very high. SaaS has been there for quite some time now. The super accelerated adoption of SaaS by B2B and B2C. So these are the 4 or 5 areas, in my opinion, we started seeing impact, and now we are kind of manage them, but we are still living with the impact for some more time. We'll live. The last bullet is something that is going to be spoken a little more now in this workshop, because that is where most of us will have to spend energy in order to make sure that having achieved BAU, business as usual, we have to be prepared for any other eventuality that may crop up while we are still struggling with COVID. I wish to proceed to the next slide. When we talk about fair traction for cloud, and let me admit and let me mention one of the service provider happily shared this slide, because to construct the slide, it was reinventing a wheel. Now look at this slide. Many of us were probably familiar with cloud. Some of us were just beginning the journey to cloud. Some of us were matured. Some of us are still struggling with conventional infrastructure. All of a sudden, we are now interacting with vendors, service providers, and learning new jargons as to V2C migration, C2C migration, data ingestion, and so on and so forth. The software-defined networks, the disaster recovery as service, and public cloud, private cloud, variety of conversation that we were holding, they have become much more serious now. Most of us have kind of understood these words and jargon, but I'm sure as we go deep dive into each one of them, they will bring their own challenges. The idea is, as we as ITDR professionals, security professionals, CIOs, CTOs, we need to get a complete grip on each terminology, because every wave of technology brings new taxonomy. And until and unless we become familiar, understand the concept, we may be making a incorrect strategy for our organization. Not that we can't do a course correction, but do it right first time is the principle most of us try to follow. So with this higher traction of cloud, many service providers, AWS, Azure, Simply Cloud in India, we have a company called NetMagic Entity. They have been their early starters. Google and many more, they have started offering services. Private cloud has been a favorite conversation for most of the enterprises. So limited point is, when we're talking cloud, it's just not taking your infrastructure as service and running stuff on that. There's a whole lot of stuff which goes about cloud management. We are now started living with multi-cloud environment. We are living with combination of hybrid cloud environment. So each environment, each experience is different. And it's important to recognize that most of the time, we as CIO, ITDR professionals, we probably have to reset ourselves to zero to learn new things. Moving further, when we spoke about accelerated adoption of cloud SaaS, in this area, what we as industry observed is that there have been established SaaS providers. Their adoption became wider. Many organizations adopted or accelerated their adoption. ERP, Salesforce, Office 365, ServiceNow, these have been there for quite some time now in the industry. The wider penetration and wider adoption is the change. Serious applications for mutual fund industries like asset investment management, these are the services people started taking rather than investing money and inventing the stuff all over again. HR management, DocuSign, these have been there, but they have become more popular now. Relatively new offering that we see in the industry is order management. All of a sudden, sitting at home, people who do not have kitchen or ability to cook, they started ordering food, and therefore food delivery, run-of-the-mill shops overnight, they become very efficient by getting into order management system. Shipping and tracking, all along we were familiar with large shipping, but even smaller shipments have started and we are able to track things. So this is a big change. Accelerated adoption has happened. The biggest, I would say, the bingo is on virtual meeting and learning platforms. The webinars, I'm sure each one of us receives at least half a dozen, if not more, links every day for participating in webinars, including this one. There are formal, semi-formal, informal meeting. People are using those links for entertainment also, and they're using it for very serious business also. Back to school initiatives in many countries have also been founded basis the virtual platform, virtual learning platforms, e-schools, whatever you label it, but net, it is the digital transformation of conventional education system. In this recent past, we also saw white labeled SaaS suddenly coming up and cropping up because it is easy to market. The go-to-market time is very, very short. So applications like marketplace, online stores, mobile payment, loyalty program, mobile application, these adoptions increase significantly. Now, when this was increasing, we also saw that some of the players which were already there, they got merged, they got taken over, and things like that. So we will talk about the risk that arises out of this cloud and SaaS a little later in the same webinar. But I want to wish to the next move and seek opinion of the participants on this poll. May I request my colleague Tarun to please bring up the poll number 2. The question to audience is, in your opinion, which criteria is most important while selecting cloud or SaaS services? I'm assuming that most of you would have selected, most of you are in the journey, but let us see what's the view of participants here. Very nice. The numbers are changing. Very good. So there are views about managed services, data security, disaster recovery, but the highest percentage that we see is everybody seems to be saying that all the 3 factors are absolutely important when you choose cloud or SaaS services. I appreciate your response. Thank you so much. Can we end the poll, please? The numbers are here. Great. The numbers are in front of you, participants. Good. Can I move to the next slide, please? Having got this poll, let's see what we have to talk as part of this webinar. Now, when we talk about adoption of cloud, adoption of SaaS, this is all pretty good. We seem to have achieved degree of maturity there. The BAU seems to have started running, but this is the time, this is the moment, this is the action point that we as ITDR professionals should start thinking. In my recall, when we all started practicing ITDR, BCM, our biggest worry used to be power, cooling, infrastructure facilities, etc. We started setting up good data centers, then we moved into network, we established good sound and solid networks. Then we started getting worried about IT outages such as server failure, database crashes, and things like that. So as ITDR professionals, we matured. As BCM professionals, we have matured. We have kind of understood how to deal with the challenges related to infrastructure, how to deal with the challenges related to IT outages, and so on and so forth. But from this point onwards in our journey, when we have adopted cloud, we have adopted SaaS, we started living in this era when we are working from home, the infrastructure is hosted somewhere else, maybe within country, outside country, wherever it is. And now we are living in this era where cloud and SaaS are kind of going to be dominating us for significant business processes. So at this point in time, when I was reflecting as to what are the new challenges for we as ITDR professionals should be preparing, some thoughts came to my mind, which I validated with my industry colleague. And here are a few points that I want to share with you. And probably I have some thought processes how we would, as an industry or as a practitioner, may want to deal with it. Of course, collectively we will win, but heightened endpoint security threats due to WFH, work from home, work from anywhere. So they are newer challenges because COVID caught us almost unaware. We were underprepared, not prepared, whatever. And this becomes a good area for hackers to use ours, and the wrongdoers will have a good time if they succeed in beating us on endpoint security. When we talk about cloud, we will probably have to understand the finer prints of the service offering, because cloud offers what is called a graded high availability, and we'll talk about each one of the bullet in subsequent slide. The security of business and customer data was there always, even if you're on premises or even if you're on private cloud. But as you go on your journey with cloud and SaaS adoption, the security of business and customer data goes on increasing. Data residency, data resiliency, data ownership will become the new challenges beyond our infrastructure stability, and so on and so forth. When we have adopted cloud and SaaS as our strategy for doing business, the corresponding ITDR will also be equally important, because nothing is foolproof, nothing is 100%, everything will have some day or other, we will experience outage for whatsoever reason. So we as ITDR professional, we cannot say that having moved to cloud, having moved to SaaS, now there's no work from me and I can kind of log out. I don't think that's the case. We still have to worry about newer things. As we learned about automation of DR in our conventional enterprise environments, DR automation in cloud will also be and is also a challenge. And unless we understand the nuances of that and fine points of that, we may not be able to stand up to the board and meet the expectation should a disaster strike for whatever reasons. Cyber threats in a SaaS area is yet another challenge. All along, be it ISO, be it cyber policies, regulatory or otherwise, we have been focusing with various policies, variety of domains, variety of controls, various activities, policies, procedures, systemic control, all of it we have gone through. However, specific to SaaS, if there are security threats, how does one deal? Because there's hardly anything that you have control over. So these are the new challenges we will have to kind of focus upon. Some of the thought processes that has run in my mind and I have shared with some of my participants revolves around these ITDR building blocks. Many of us are familiar. In ITDR, we have been having a captive on-premises DR. We have been using hybrid setups such as on-premises cloud, private cloud, public cloud, so on and so forth. So the ITDR building blocks are not going to change. What is going to get added is a new flavor or new perspective to each of the block. So when we look at the each of the block from a different perspective, that's where we start thinking of new challenges, new questions, and probably new resolutions. For example, DR, we have been using various techniques. 20 years back when I started, lock shipping was the favorite stuff, and now we are matured to very automated switch or switch back between captive data centers. But when we embrace cloud, when we embrace SaaS, and when we avail services of service provider as disaster recovery as service, what is it that I should be worrying about? When I choose a particular public cloud service or any service from service provider, what are the areas of concern? These are the new questions that will start bothering us. So subsequent slides, we will talk about that. But before that, I will request my colleague Tarun to bring up poll number 3. So poll number 3, seeking your opinion about, do you agree that while adopting cloud, it is equally important to review and reimage your ITDR, or you can live with your existing and conventional ITDR plans? Great. I can see the responses. I'm happy to see there are disagreements on this. I'm also happy to see there are some participants who somewhat agree. That means there is a partial disagreement. It will be interesting to understand the rationale behind, and it's important to understand that perspective as well. Great, but most of our participants think that while adopting cloud, it's important to really relook your ITDR plan, whether the existing ITDR plan that your organization has built over a period and reviewed, refined over years, whether the plan is as effective, as efficient, as suitable in the new era also. Great. Thank you very much, Tarun. I will, if the poll is over, I will pause here. Results are in front of us. Great. I wish to move to the next slide, which is talking about the challenges that we saw and how does one take it further. So look at this bullet that I had shown in earlier slide related to newer challenges with reference to endpoint security from an ITDR perspective. Obviously, last few months, almost a year now, we have attempted to do all conventional good things, possible things, such as antivirus, content filters. We have used VDI, virtual desktop. We have used remote desktop concept. We have used browser isolation, application virtualization, all of it that we have used. We have also matured to use access through VPN and authentication through Active Directory. We experienced some difficulties in the beginning in the sense that the licenses were not enough, configuration issues, and so on and so forth. But I think over a period of time, we all have stabilized. We have also applied our BAU control, business as usual controls for data leakage and privacy. But as we know, hackers are still wanting to beat us. So therefore, one of the points that came to my mind, in addition to doing all of it, we have to constantly think what more we need to do with reference to the endpoint security, because as we saw in the poll, maximum threat will be from the endpoint themselves. Some of the issues of data leakage and privacy, those will become very serious, because in an office perimeter, very critical operations for banks, there are critical operations like dealer room. For stock exchanges, there are operations called market watch. So these are sensitive areas where each and every action, if it is leaked, it has got impact not only on your organization, but entire market as a whole. And therefore, any data leakage on such very, very critical activities will have to be attended to very, very seriously. And we'll have to take a relook that work from home may be a good strategy, but is it a good strategy for every bit and inch of activity that happens in my organization? There will be compelling reasons for us to continue in a tightly controlled environment, because loosening that control will have much more serious impact. So one of the thoughts that crossed my mind is, while we have looked at it, let's not forget that there are extremely critical operations in the organization, maybe manned by very few people, but those are something that we cannot afford to allow to go on work from home. So while we embrace work from home, we have to be cautious and clear. While we implement technical control, including such as OS sandboxing, and I came across a tool, and let me admit, I'm not here to promote any tool. The tools are required to be evaluated by all of you. But these are the thought process that are in my mind. I did some study so that we can share, talk about it as a part of this whole community. So we can explore OS sandboxing as a major. I spoke about graded. I'm moving to the next one. So graded high availability offering in cloud. So if you go to cloud service provider, various SLAs are available to you: 99.9, 99.99, 99.95. So there are grades there. Now within your organization, when you build a data center, you are 100% available for most of your application. So in this area, when we look at graded, we'll have to see that every SLA probably will have corresponding incremental billing part of it. So which one do I take, which one do I not take are the consideration. So we'll probably have to relook at it. Most of the cloud service providers, very, very robust provisioning they have done across regions, across geography. So the concept of region availability zones, the limitations of that is required to be understood, coupled with the local laws of the country. The resilience patterns are something that the cloud service providers talk. We as ITDR professionals or CIO, CTOs, we have to understand what are the resilience patterns. Is one pattern suitable for all my applications, or within that I need to kind of segregate my applications, and so that I do not over-engineer it, I don't over-provision it, and simultaneously I don't do wrong things. So basically the basic principle of right sizing, right assessment will apply here also. We need to choose things wisely for variety of reasons, particularly the bottom line issues. There are technologies that have been implemented by cloud service provider, and when you do a replication in terms of VM to VM across region, they're offering round trip time less than 2 milliseconds also. Obviously, when you configure such services or subscribe for services, there is a cost attached to that. So the limited point I want to mention is, we as ITDR professional, if you are engaging it or you have already engaged, but you want to review your cloud strategy in terms of ITDR, you may want to look at some of the graded facilities that is being offered there. The security of business and customer data has been a matter of concern, always continues to be a matter of concern, particularly in a hybrid environment where something is on premises, something is on cloud. So we need to worry about the backup of these and make sure the customer data, business data, it doesn't get into the dark web. Particularly when we are operating a multi-cloud environment, this becomes much more serious, because your ability to manage will be then required to be demonstrated across multi-cloud environment. And as usual, CIO, CTO, ITDR professional, all of us are always struggling with inadequate manpower, and the skill set there. So this is one of the challenge we as CIOs, CTOs, and IT professionals will have to handle that. At a bare minimum, all of us have been encrypting the data at rest and in motion, but strong recommendation in case we are not yet done, please undertake that, because that's the easiest way to kind of put things at rest for you in terms of your reputation. Moving forward, there are 2-3 points on this I want to talk. One is about data residency, data sovereignty, and data localization. These words sound
CK,
very familiar.
I
Yes, please.
just want to interrupt. There's one red line coming in your presentation in the middle,
Yeah,
marker line. If you
I
could
have
remove
no
that.
clue how to remove that. I have no clue. Sorry about that, but I will try something. But net, if it goes, then we will lose that. So I will request participants to bear with the red line. It is not obstructing because we have to focus on the content. Is my personal perspective. So let me go back, Tarun. Thank you for your interruption, but sorry, can't help it right now. The data residency, data sovereignty, data localization, these are the 3 words that are used interchangeably, but we have to recognize what's the difference between the two. It's hair splitting, sometimes reading with magnifying glass, but there's a difference. It's example that you can be keeping the data in a given country. However, the laws of the land with reference to protection and punishment under the law may or may not be applicable. And therefore, we have to understand the fine print and understand the difference between these 3 terms. And based on your organization's regulatory structure, regulatory requirement, you may have to kind of ensure that you do not cross the line as set out by the regulators. So limited point is location of storage of data, and data being subjected to legal protection and punishment under law are 2 distinct and different things. There are tools such as in-country. As I said, I'm not here to promote any tool. This is all my Google study. Explore tools and solutions like in-country, which will help you do that, particularly the organizations that are governed by GDPR. For them, it is extremely important. So while we're implementing BAU or whether you are implementing ITDR, you cannot cross the borders of the regulators is fundamental principle. When we talk about data resiliency is a big topic. We have been working with the data protection, etc. But here in the cloud and SaaS environment, particularly SaaS, we have to kind of have a good conversation with the service provider, make sure that copies of the data are stored across different fault zones or maybe multiple fault domains, so that we are protected under any circumstances, because some of the critical organizations, they demand 0 data loss. So whether you are operating in a 0 data loss scenario or acceptable data loss scenario whatsoever, but data resiliency is going to be an important consideration. For the database standpoint, we have been working with ACID principles. So when we go into SaaS environment, once again, the monitoring of data for atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability, these are called ACID principles. We still have to make sure that the ACID principles are adhered to when we look at data resiliency. Obviously, we will have to use right tools, because nothing is possible these days using any manual tool or manual exercise. Whole thing is changed. So there are a variety of tools, Veeam and Zero2 and so on and so forth. Choose them wisely depending upon what RPU consideration you want to have. So that's about data resiliency. I have 2 more slides on this and then we'll go into the next floor. Data ownership has been one of the biggest worry, because if you host the data on cloud, the line of control, in talking in legal terms, the next point is about legal, but we have to make sure that there's a clear distinction that service providers right and your right. You have right of ownership, and service provider is responsible for storage and processing of the data. Now, while the data is being stored there and processed, how are you going to make sure that it is stored and only stored and nothing proliferation is happening? It is not being siphoned out for any reason, and so on and so forth. People say it's a business of trust, but at the end of the day, we all believe in God and we believe we trust in evidences. So therefore, evidencing is extremely important. I have picked up a statement about Office 365. Office 365 is very boldly stated that is in front of you, and I'm sure various service providers, they give you comfort from their standpoint, but at the end of the day, the risk is to your organization that you represent, and therefore it will be wiser to look at this also as a part of your reimaging ITDR. Legal contractual, this is a big topic. Obviously, I'm not a master on that, but some of the things that crossed my mind, I'm trying to put it here. Should your service provider be taken over by somebody, or he chooses to wind up, or the business terminates, or you choose to terminate the contract? What is the treatment to the contract? When you are hosted in your own organization, these are not as serious matters. Dispute handling, arbitration, jurisdiction, because it is possible that your service provider is not part of your country, is hosted somewhere outside, and you will struggle with the jurisdiction issue. Interpretation and imposing right to audit, because most of the ISO auditors or whichever auditor, they demand that you have a right to audit. Now, right to audit is fine. What is the depth and degree you have a right to audit? Can you go and audit the firmware that has been implemented, or you are allowed to audit only to a given extent? The treatment to unauthorized access or unauthorized use of data, which is solely attributable to service provider. How do you treat in a contractual manner? I am not trying to say that the service providers are not good. They have taken care. But at the end of the day, the business is to be protected by you and your organizational team. And therefore, it may sound a little brash, but it's important to understand, should such a incidents come to light, what's the treatment to that? Are you going to tolerate? Are you going to penalize? Are you going to terminate? Let's be clear. I'm not trying to hint any negative here, but still, it's important to talk about it, think through, and put it in proper articulation. Billing, payment, credit issues can also crop up because every line, the granular billing is important, and what you pay for, while it sounds very attractive, pay as you use, but you need to recognize, as a wise buyer, you have to understand the breakup. You have to understand where you are putting your dollars, which is the fixed component, which is the variable component, and so on and so forth. We also have to understand that now that you have chosen to work on SaaS or cloud kind of environment, the non-payment may lead to blocked access. So it's important that whatever be the reason, you probably have to worry about the billing cycles, take care of that, because at the end of the day, service provider will have his business to run, and he will have his own policies to treat you. And therefore, any blocked access will bring your organization to a grinding halt. The worst thing can happen when you are in disaster, and that point in time, some payment issue crops up. It becomes much more serious affair within the organization. So the reason of bringing up these points on the slide for the participant is just to give an idea that these are also the considerations. This is probably the last slide about the challenges that we spoke before. When we talk about ITDR on public cloud and SaaS, while it's good to think that if I have outsourced my services, it is service provider who has to worry about everything. And what I have bought by paying money is peace of mind. But it might be appropriate not to assume things, because implicit inclusion of ITDR as a service may or may not be there. So when you are offered a bouquet of services or a bundle of services, might be important and good to go through micro details of each one of them and understand each service being offered at a highest degree of granularity, because this is not an engagement you can kind of get out of a taxi or cab. So therefore, once you engage, you are probably engaged for a reasonably long period of time. Cloud and SaaS are sticky businesses. They run on the stickiness between the service provider and the customer. But once you're there, then you got to be there for good time. So choose wisely and then engage into the relationship. Subscriptions are important, because when you subscribe, there is probably minimum subscription period and so on and so forth. There could be try and buy period. So understand them and then only engage yourself into the relationship is my submission. Most of us would have subscribed to IaaS, infrastructure service, platform service, software service. Not all of them are in one category. Each application could have been either in PaaS, SaaS, or IaaS environment. So in nutshell, your organization has engaged into multiple services, probably with single service provider or multiple service provider. Now, what is the roles and responsibility with reference to basic hygiene, such as patching, hardening, and so on and so forth, upgrades? So applying security patches. So who is responsible? Who will do to what extent? So on and so forth. Underlying storage, if the firmware is required to be upgraded, who will do that? And if you are operating in a multi-cloud environment, what are the terms of engagement with each one of them, because it is likely that each service provider may have different terms of reference. And therefore, when you engage, it's more of a contract management now than a technology management. When we look at DR automation in cloud, it's important that we also have been writing in many purchase orders contract that vendor will demonstrate his capability of DR, but the proof of pudding is required to be tested. So one of the recommendation is that when you engage, probably it might be good idea to kind of go through a drill, but it's important to ensure regulatory compliances. Some of the regulators, they demand quarterly drill must be done, half yearly drill must be done, the environment must be different, the scenarios have to be different, so on and so forth. And therefore, whether your service provider will be able to meet all the expectations, not only yours, but your regulator, is also important consideration if at all you are considering DRS service, whether automated or non-automated. The last point on this is the management of cyber threats by SaaS providers. We have embraced SaaS, variety of reasons, either convenience, cost, whatever it may be. But having chosen, we have to recognize SaaS is a highly attractive target for hackers and wrongdoers because all is in one basket. So one SaaS service made unavailable has larger impact. And therefore, if at all you want to be somebody who is careful in that, you may want to evaluate the SaaS provisioning carefully on variety of aspects, including DNS security, capability to mitigate DDoS in seconds. Earlier, we used to take minutes, but now with AI and time series kind of algorithm, the DDoS mitigation, auto-mitigation kicks in within seconds. So these are the capabilities, whether your service provider offers, doesn't offer, is it at a fees, and so on and so forth. And obviously, protection against ransomware, because within SaaS and within cloud, my belief is most of the infrastructural challenges would have been taken care by matured service providers. They would take care of basic things, basic hygiene, so on and so forth. So two big risks that I see is DDoS and protection against ransomware as far as the external threats are concerned. But if we talk about internal threats, there are plenty and many. So these are some of the considerations I would probably consider if I were to reimagine my ITDR, and I'll relook at all my plans developed so far, by which I am able to apply the newer paradigm, post-COVID paradigm of living with COVID in a cloud or SaaS environment and work from home environment. With these parameters, if I am able to validate, probably I'll be a little more comfortable. So the concluding remarks on this webinar is that it has seriously impacted mankind, business, as well as economy. And we as IT people, we as ITDR professionals, we as CIO, CTO, we are big enablers to all of it, whether it is mankind, business, or economy, because IT is there everywhere, whether it is a hospital or is it a research lab producing vaccine, or we are whatever it is. We are a backbone, so we have to be more conscious. While frontline workers will take care of the patients, etc., but the backbone has to be equally strong. So I think all of us, we should feel proud and say that we are also contributing to this whole evolution. The challenges of COVID, obviously we spoke few, and obviously every day will bring new challenges. We as ITDR professionals have to attend to them. Every challenge will bring us opportunity. We have to encash every opportunity to re-image our ITDR, because under any circumstances, under any situation, the show must go on, and show must go on. We as ITDR professional BCM, we have told ourselves that we are in a state of readiness anytime, all the time. So with that, I wish to kind of bring poll number 4. Poll number 4, may I request Tarun to bring poll 4? Yeah. So in this webinar we spoke, here are a few questions. Numbers are changing, yes. 52% have voted so far. Many people are still voting. It's in progress. 60% have voted good. Sincerely appreciate the response from participants. Great. So the results are 7% feel that no focus workshop is required for this kind of a conversation. 75% of the participants feel that yes, there is a need to have a focus workshop, and that's input to core in case core can come up with such workshops. Some people agree, 18% are somewhat in agreement with this recommendation or opinion. I sincerely thank all the participants for participating in the poll and sparing the time for this webinar. With that, I thank you, all of you. One of the upcoming training courses of CORE, the dates are here. This is not related to the COVID related. On behalf of CORE, I run this workshop. The upcoming workshop is on these dates. Whoever interested, you can reach out to the email IDs and numbers given here. With that, I want to thank each one of you, participants, the supporting team, Mr. Tarun and Chanchal. I also wish to thank the CIO, CTO, veterans in the industry who helped me build a content together, and also the service providers who helped me understand their offerings a little more clearly. With this big thank you, I want to close this webinar. Thank you so much. Over to Tarun.
Hi, I would like to bring in now Ted Katagi. Now, since we're talking so much about cloud, Ted's single focus has been making Kenja the next best thing on enterprise cloud. So over to Ted now.
Okay, thank you, CK and Tarun. CK provided a very comprehensive look at all the different ways that we have to reimagine the DR. I'm just going to focus on two areas. One is improving your resilience in software, and the second is making your plans much more dynamic in response to changing conditions. So first of all, just a brief background on Kenja. We're based in Japan, and we have some of the largest Japanese companies as our clients. These are just a few. We've been recognized by people like the Gartner Group. One area that first I'll look at in ITDR is that, of course, we want to get around single points of failure. Microsoft remains one of the largest targets for hacking attacks and a single point of failure. And you also have a problem of accessibility to data. If SharePoint itself is not working, then it doesn't matter that you had data resilience because you can't get access to the data, right? And so this is one of those very interesting things is that let's look at a typical IT disaster recovery configuration. So you have a whole primary data center, a Windows Server, SharePoint, and Microsoft SQL, right? The backup system is the same exact thing, which works on a physical hardware level. So if your hardware and physical data center is disrupted, then that works. But my point to you is what happens if the Windows Server software itself is not working globally? A patch was not applied to both systems. On SharePoint, we've seen SharePoint go down. What happens if SharePoint is now down, not because of a hack on your system, but on a hack on Microsoft itself? What happens if Microsoft SQL is down? So people are not considering this, but they're spending lots of money in particularly when it's in a physical backup center. But let's consider an alternative instead of, let's look at a backup system could be a different system, whether it be Kenja or not. But I'll show you an example. An advantage of this is that we're on AWS. We use Linux. We're using Aurora MySQL, so it's completely independent from the Microsoft stack. And instead of SharePoint, we provide a software called Kenja Rooms. And so how would this actually look like in doing this? So if you had a SharePoint backup scenario where I have, let's say, all the folders, we have a connector to SharePoint. So we have Active Directory, and Active Directory links to the same mapping that SharePoint does. So here's a mapping of all the different roles and responsibilities for each different folder access that you have. And we have a backup file, and we look at all the files that you have. Now, you might say, well, wouldn't you have the same issue? Then people have access, but now how do they learn this Kendra Rooms thing? Well, we actually have thought about that, and what we do instead of just saying data backup is, with one button, you can now back this up as a complete website. You turn this into an access controlled website that the people with access can view, right? So again, it's so simple that, again, zero training, people have a link that they know to go to, and that's your data backup. So that's one example of how we can think about an additional layer of being stronger in resilience on software in particular, not just data and hardware. The second thing is that your plans will change. A lot of people will have, oh, I've got the perfect plan. It's all in a PDF. It's all in a Word document, and it's got sections and tabs and all that. Well, guess what? In a real dynamic situation, you need a dynamic plan to actually respond to a dynamic situation. So how would that actually look like? So again, using this Kendra Rooms example, is if we had information management, and if you have a DR planning template and automation of your documentation, each one of these you can consider as a folder. But in Rooms, it's not just a folder. We actually map it to the tasking and also the content in there as well. So within this DR planning template, let's say you had a plan overview, emergency media. Now you can take any sort of template you want, and I've just took a sample template here, but and we've already seen these things, where you have 1.1, 1.2, all these things that you typically would have, right? We then remap this, instead of that, is into a live set of rooms. So I have a plan overview and emergency. I go into plan overview. Now here's where it gets a little bit more interesting, is that I can actually, on plan overview itself, I can share it with certain people only. So now, instead of sending a big PDF document, which honestly almost nobody reads, this is the very sad fact, that you will know this, is that a 50-page document is seldom read by anyone, despite the fact that we spend man years of effort in it. And so instead of that, what if we had a section where we're actually breaking this down into components, where we have the same things, and now I can put a task right against this. I can add a new task against this. I can see the status of the task. I can make a comment right here very easily. This is good, and we can now take a look at this. And if we want to look at the task only, we can look at the tasks. And if we want to see the task broken down by a Gantt chart view, we can even see that too. So we can see a Gantt chart view. So we actually are able to do all our planning in one room, instead of having our Microsoft project over here and our SharePoint over there. So it allows me to dynamically respond to a crisis. The other area of where you may want a dynamic response is, you may want a dynamic response in your emergency response, for example. And here, your emergency response, maybe what is BCP or fire? And if we go into fire, we have test announcements and a department testing. So if we went into test announcements, and here's where we want to get engagement from people. So if we have this thing of, do you know what to do when it counts? And there's a building fire evacuation drill. We can think about this. And again, these are very easy to edit. Anyone can go in who has access to the room, and we can now change this however we want, right? So it's very easy to change live. And this is what I meant by dynamic response. So, but again, we don't want to give this to everyone like this. What we want to do is we want to get a much more visual way to look at this. So if we looked at a visual way, then this might be one example of a visual where you have all the different steps, and then you can actually see the video right here. So you can actually play the video, and we can do that right there. So so again, this is just a couple. It's a normal day. This is just a couple ideas on how to think about planning dynamically, and also thinking about the software component of your resilience. don't rely overly on one solution. If there's a backup solution, then it increases resilience and your overall capabilities. So that's it. I want to end here and see if we have any questions on my section or on CK's section.
We do have a question on SaaS, CK.
Yes.
So this is by Pritesh. He says, we have a SaaS 18 on a SaaS provide. How up to date should it be? If it is dated August 2018, is it possible to take comfort or not?
So can I respond?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as I practice, every document that you produce, particularly the plans, it's a good practice to review it at least once a year or event based. Now, if I hear you right, it's August 2018, so we are almost 2 years old in terms of document. So it might be appropriate for one to look at the document and review, because things change quick and very fast. So it's important to kind of take a look at it. Maybe things would not have changed for you, but I'm sure there would be things that would have undergone a change from service provider perspective and many other things. So relying on an old document is something which is not recommended actually. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and I would add to that too, is that on Tarun, is that that a document is one thing, and again, you're measuring things like it's in years or months, but the best response would be something where a core team of people would have access to changing conditions and could assign tasks based on a dynamic document, like what I was showing. So that to me is the next level up. And again, one of the things we're trying to think about working with the DR community here to build together.
Correct. Agree with you.
All right. So any more questions that come up, we're going to share them on an email with you. I would request all the participants to open up the cameras for a minute so that we can take a group picture together. Thank you. A lot more people. And I need to see smiling people today. Nearly end of the week
Thank
now.
You so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys, for taking the time out today to attend this webinar. I'm sure people like Ted and CK add a lot of value to what they do, and they take out their time to actually, speak about the issues that are there in the market today. And we keep on coming up with such webinars. We have a YouTube link that I've sent it to you guys. Subscribe to the link. You can see updates there every time, anytime. And I'd like to thank you all for participating today. And CK or Ted, any closing words, please?
I just wanted to add on what Ted said. So there is a regulator, particularly in financial industry, and they have also been worried, like Ted said, that what if Microsoft itself as a technology stack is compromised? And you will have a primary as well as secondary working on identical technology stack, and therefore you are kind of affected in both places simultaneously. So this regulator, and I was working for an organization which is regulated by this regulator, and therefore they were encouraging the regulated entities to review their plans and try and introduce what they used to call as a multi-service facility. So multi-service facility basically means that you don't use identical stuff for doing same thing, because if a given process, given tool, given method, if it experiences a disruption, you will be disrupted even in primary as well as secondary site. So the favorite example is, if you've been using automated system, can we go back to manual system? Obviously, going back to manual is out of question these days. But then in case I'm using database product A, can I use database product B in other location? So if there is an inherent bug in the database product, at least my other site will survive and work. And therefore, people have started developing applications which are kind of agnostic to technology stack. That's what Ted is trying to. In my mind, that's what I understood. That if SharePoint doesn't work, then you are probably affected. So instead of that, you use an alternate technology. So when Ted was talking, I was reminded of this multi-service facility concept introduced by the regulator. So that's 2 cents from my side.
Thanks, CK. And I would also say to everyone here that, and CK said this too, is that this is a pandemic is actually an opportunity in disguise. This is something where all of your companies now realize that this is actually something that they have to fund. And so take the opportunity to actually try to build your systems up while there's more interest in this than usual. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Should we stay?
Ted and
yeah, sure.
yeah, sure. Stay back. Everybody else